chanho kolo gyue gyego no chanho kyaba sambo sanjiro kanla kan de tala de tumba chane so cha chalo. Dear brothers and sisters, indeed, I think we, as a Tibetan, we carry some difficult job, struggle, entirely based on non-violent principle and compassion principle. Actually passing through difficult period. So in such period, you, as a part of international community, came to express your deep concern and support. So grateful. Thank you. Then, I personally, I'm speaking now as a citizen of Tibet, or simple Buddhist monk of Tibet. I already retired from political responsibility. As you know, not only my own, the retirement, but also almost 4-century-old tradition, the Lama institution eventually automatically had of both temple and spirituality. Now that kind of tradition now voluntarily, happily, proudly ended. So I come here just on a simple, ordinary Tibetan. Losang Sengala, elected political leadership, and I'm an educated person. So actually, I always introduce him as politically my boss. Meantime, there is no possibility resign from Dalai Lama-ship. So therefore, still spiritually, I'm his leader. So now, the main reason why I came here is my respect to you all. I always consider our supporters are not pro-Tibetan, but rather pro-justice and pro-non-violence. So you, our supporters, actually stand firmly on principle of non-violence. So it is my duty pay my respect to you and come here. Then I think global level, firstly, on global level, there are a number of people or community who really experience difficulties, sometimes including violence. So now, unfortunately, many cases, although their cause is just cause, but use violence. As a result, more negative consequences, it always happens. So like Tibet struggle, right from the beginning, non-violence principle, according to that way, is we carry. I consider, you see, these Tibetan sort of burning. Certainly these people, since they sort of have courage or determination to sacrifice their own life, so they can easily harm other people. But I think these people, I think still, although they have practiced a little bit sort of violence, but still, I think in principle, I think they still practice non-violence. So therefore, your support, Tibetan cause, is they give sort of encouragement or moral support, and also practical level, as much as you can use support. So such sort of struggle carried strictly non-violent basis should be succeeded with. Otherwise, the other sort of similar people who are facing this kind of problem, and see, then will say, oh, non-violence is useless. And nothing can be achieved. Oh. So sometimes you see people, violent sort of movement, more sort of interest, peaceful, mutually agreeable solution sort of effort, right? Trying to mutually agreeable solution. Sometimes the people feel, oh, it's weak. I think that's totally wrong. I always consider violence is result of anger. Anger comes from sort of weak insight. If you have more sort of confidence, inner strength, and then there is more chance to talk. If you have lack of self-confidence here, then usually you see, use gun. So actually non-violent struggle is the sign of inner strength. So in any way, global level, I think such the movement, including Tibetan sort of struggle, strictly through non-violent way, it should be because of the succeeded way. And already number of Chinese brothers, sisters, since we strictly follow non-violent way, and secondly, try to find mutually agreeable solution. Therefore, a lot of Chinese intellectuals on democratic sort of today, because of those Chinese who involved in democratic sort of movement, many of them, you see, expressing solidarity. Now that number increasing. So therefore, that's, I think, on a global level, I think that's one thing. Then Tibetan issue itself. Whenever I talk or explain about Tibetan issue, since many years, I always say, usually you see people, when they heard Tibetan problem, the human right violation, or some other. But I feel Tibet problem is there are different sort of aspects. One aspect, the ecology. A lot of damage inside Tibet. Firstly, a lot of deforestation. And then secondly, exploiting nature resources, extreme way. Don't care about the impact of environment. So, and then some my Indian friend, they say, because of high altitude and because of dry climate, once you see damage about ecology happen, it takes longer period to recover. So therefore, the Tibetan sort of ecology is quite delicate. So then, geographically, people usually call roof of the world. It's true, the highest. When we look map at Tibet, it's almost like a city roof of the world. So naturally, and basically cold climate. So therefore, a lot of snows. And then major rivers which cover from Pakistan up to China. All these major rivers, their ultimate source come from Tibet, Tibetan, as a Himalayan sort of snow mountains or plateaus, Tibetan plateau. So these rivers, of course, I am not very Kasuda, Kasuda detailed sort of a study, no. But generally, I feel over, I think, 1 billion human population in northern Pakistan and northern India and Bangladesh on the east, and then China, Burma, China itself. I think over 1 billion human life depend on these rivers. Now already there's clear sign because of damage environment, including deforestation. The rivers, firstly, sometimes create a lot of sort of flood, or sometimes basically reduce. Like famous sort of lake, Kokonor, Songombo, I think much reduced, according to many people, they observed. Dry up. When I come from my place, Kumbum to Lhasa, I remember very clear. One day, I think perhaps at the clock maybe around 4 o'clock, I walk. I think that night, I think that day we spent, I think, nearby. So I remember, I walk the edge of the Kokonor Lake, Tongombo. I remember one dead fish there. That I remember very clearly. Quite big, like that. So my age then, 4-year-old, like that. So quite clean. I still remember, blue, clean. Now that seems, according some people who visit this area, according to them, I think much reduced, like that. So then one Irish ecologist, once he showed me one article wrote by one Chinese ecologist. He says, he described Tibetan plateau as a third pole. Reason, the effect from Tibetan plateau to global warming as much as South Pole and North Pole. Therefore, he described Tibetan plateau as a third pole. Then, the same article, this mentioned the global warming rate in globe and rest of the world, 0.1. Tibetan plateau, 0.3. So these are words of experts, scientist, expert, and one Chinese. So the ecology of Tibet is something really important. look, former Soviet Union, they only concentrate about big factories, industry, heavy industry, these things. Not much concern about ecology. So negligence of that period still sort of some problem in the Russian Federation. So Tibet also, I think originally many Chinese not much idea about the importance of ecology or preservation of this because of the ecology. Now later, I remember Zorongchen, during his sort of prime ministership, Zorongchen, he said, I heard, he said, give some instruction. Those sort of delicate area about environment must stop deforestation, cutting trees. But then, because of corruption, the local officials and some businessmen, you see, through their sort of corrupt way, these instructions not implement fully on this area. So then many Chinese companies, they are very, very sort of hungry to greed, to exploit nature resources, including water resources like that. So this, I think, one of the important aspects of Tibetan issue. The political issue, once mutual understanding reach, easily, within short period, within perhaps few weeks, we can solve. But this, once ecology damage once done, then even political situation, you see some sort of the change. Damage already now there. So it is, I feel, this more serious. So therefore, our friend, please think more this aspect, one thing. Second thing, Tibetan culture, since Buddhism reached Tibet, and particularly the Buddhism, the Nalanda sort of tradition, which is, you see, Nagarjuna, Aryadeva, Buddhapalita, Arya Asanga, all these has great sort of Indian thinkers, philosophers, and a logician. So Tibetan Buddhist tradition mainly is based on these traditions. Of course, Pali tradition also there, but mainly Sanskrit tradition. So before Buddhism reached Tibet, of course, Buddhism there, it seems to see, of course, these, I think, historian expert should research more. I think before Buddhism reached the Buddhism, also you see some sort of, including, I think, medicine and I think, and different sort of, knowledge already there. However, after Buddhism reached, you see, even Buddhism itself, I think, much developed. So in any way, Buddhism which we follow is not just prayer and some simple meditation, not that way, but I think a lot of subject, actually academic subject. So it is quite clear. So the unique Nalanda sort of tradition is use human intelligence maximum way, through that way transform our emotions. Not through prayer, not through faith. Here you see Buddha himself is made very clear, oh, my follower should not accept my teaching out of faith, but rather out of thorough investigation and experiment and research. So that way of sort of approach is quite similar to that of scientific sort of way of approach, like that. So I think Buddhism, Tibet, Buddhist tradition, I think I myself, as a student of Nalanda tradition, and last 53 years, I had many opportunity meeting or exchange with Buddhist brothers, sisters from different Buddhist countries. Then, it became quite clear that Tibetan Buddhist tradition is quite sophisticated and a lot of sort of involvement, study, and academic as an academic subject, not just a prayer. Oh, some Tibetan monasteries, of course, the whole day they spend some doing kasa puja, rituals, without knowing the meaning. That's, I think, waste of time. I really feel waste of time. I'm quite critical about that kind of practice. I think at least the last several centuries, some monasteries, because of the go that way. I think that's quite backward. I think we should think more seriously, realistically. So sometimes superstition also involved. But Nalanda, pure Nalanda sort of, they are such a tradition. No rule of superstition or blind faith. Investigate everything. So therefore, nowadays, you see, we have very serious sort of dialogue with modern scientists. They are not Buddhist, not religious people. But we have, you see, when we talk, you see, we have sort of common sort of today, common attitude to carry investigation. What is the reality? So for modern sciences, there are investigation mainly on matter and on matters which we can calculate or measurement. Now, last few years, I think over around one decade, number of top scientists now showing interest about mind, about emotion. Once they develop that interest, the information, only Buddhist tradition, of course, ancient Hindu tradition. I think those traditions where practice of shamatha and practice of vipassana, naturally, explanation about mind there. So only, I think, ancient Indian sort of spiritual tradition, more material about mind, about emotion, how to tackle these things, and particularly in Buddhism. So therefore, you see, so that shows, you see, Tibetan Buddhism is quite sort of sophisticated, like that. So Buddhism, I think, no question, one important spiritual tradition of the world. Then the Buddhist culture. I usually make distinction, Buddhism and Buddhist culture. Buddhism related to one individual case, individual practice. Buddhist culture, like Christianity and Christian culture, and Islam, faith and Islam culture. You see, they are always, you see, two things. Faith for individual, culture related with society. So one example is the Tibetan Muslims. Last at least, I think, 3-4 centuries, Tibetan Muslim come from mainly from Ladakh. they settle in Tibet. So these we usually consider Tibetan Muslim. And they themselves also is considered Tibetan Muslim. In fact, this summer, I visited Srinagar in their own place. So I think one thing, they are Islam, they practitioner of Islam. But they kept Tibetan language very very intact. When I meet those Tibetan Muslim, their children, as a student, they speak Tibetan very well. How they kept in their family. So like that. So they, religiously, they are Islam, Muslim. But as far as their culture is concerned, they are very much in the Tibetan Buddhist culture sort of atmosphere. So they love Tibetan language. So sometimes Tibetan families in America or some different countries, in the family, I was told, the parents and their children speak more English because you see, parents speak English because they felt to help practice of the English language their children. In Srinagar, those Muslim Tibetan, they deliberately try to keep Tibetan language. So those Buddhist family, Tibetan Buddhist family in some area don't care about Tibetan language. Muslim Tibetan, they really carry, because of the seriously, effectively preservation of Tibetan language like that. So in any way, I always make distinction, Buddhist culture and Buddhist religion or Buddhist faith. So Buddhist faith only for Buddhist, but Buddhist culture related with the community, including like these Tibetan Muslim. So therefore, some extent, Tibetan Buddhist culture, usually I describe culture of peace, culture of non-violence, culture of compassion. So that really worthwhile to preserve. Particularly for Chinese brothers, sisters, I think a lot of damage. As a result, now the moral things and peaceful culture, truthful culture, compassionate culture, I think very much damaged in China proper. So therefore, preservation of Tibetan Buddhist culture, I think, for future millions of young Chinese, also you should get some sort of the benefit, preservation of Tibetan Buddhist culture. So therefore, and then of course, Tibetan Buddhism and Tibetan Buddhist culture, I think at least directly link with at least 13, 14 millions, the whole Himalayan sort of range, and then also in Mongolia, and then Russian Federation, at least 3 republics, Kalmykia Republic, Buryatia Republic, and then Tuva Republic. So these directly link. They used to study Buddhism through Tibetan. And their prayer, their chanting also in Tibetan, like that. So this area directly link. And then Himalayan range, as I mentioned earlier, and Bhutan, like these countries, and Nepal also is in northern Nepal. So therefore, preservation of Tibetan Buddhism, I think, directly linked with these interests of these people. And then Buddhist culture, I think in some extent, I think a global level, maybe we have some potential to make some contribution regarding better world, happier world, non-violent world. Different place, different country. I always talk about the importance of inner peace. and inner peace entirely based on warm-heartedness here, irrespective of whether believer or non-believer. So these my philosophy talk, quite some people, you see, really showing, including interest. Including scientists, they're really showing interest. So this is nothing special, come from my mind. But there's Tibetan culture. So therefore, I think preservation of Tibetan Buddhism and Tibetan Buddhist culture is not only concern for 6 million Tibetan peoples, but also, I think, the larger community. So therefore, preservation of Tibetan Buddhism, Buddhist culture is something very important and really worthwhile to preserve. And I think we need some special effort because some of the narrow-minded communist officials, like Tenguyen, some time back, actually, you see, he mentioned one party meeting, the ultimate source of the danger of separation, Tibet from mainland China, is Tibetan Buddhist faith. Silly. I think there are, now I heard, you see, in China proper, the Buddhist population, over 300 million or 400 million, like that. So these also source of threat. No, I don't think any threat. So therefore, you see, we need some special effort. You see, some of the narrow-minded officials, they deliberately try to minimize Tibetan culture, Tibetan Buddhist faith. Once you see damage, serious damage done, it take longer period to recover. So then I think millions of Chinese Buddhists, I think, really feel regret, isn't it? I really feel like that. So therefore, this is one aspect of Tibetan cause, like that. Then, politically, also, China, People's Republic of China, and India, these two nations, most populated two nations. So genuine good relations between these two giant Asian countries. It's not only Asian, but whole world, I think most two populated nation. Now this moment is in differences. This country, most populated democratic country. The other, most populated totalitarian system. That's big differences. But I think whole world trend, more openness, more democracy, right? More freedom, rule of law. That's a world trend. So no matter how powerful People's Republic of China, you say have to go along that world trend. You say cannot go this way. Perhaps I think now new leadership, I think may realize that reality. So as things have been stated, seeking truth from fact. So I think fact is like that. Is the world go like that? So they have to sort of adopt a policy on the basis of reality. Otherwise, unrealistic sort of policy always fail to bring result, satisfactory result. So therefore, now, good relation between China and India based on trust, Sino-Indian relation, genuine friendship, genuine good relation based on mutual trust is a very important factor, very important sort of point, matter where I think both countries have immense benefit. I think a lot of money can save. So for that reason, Tibet issue, so long this kind of sort of situation remain, the Chinese government compelled station large number of soldiers. That automatically creates suspicion in this country. So therefore, politically, I feel the Tibet issue is quite sort of important sort of factor in order to develop genuine friendship between these two Asian giants based on mutual trust. So then, these points I would like to mention to you, and then current situation and sort of the basic our stand, how to solve Tibetan problem, as far as our concern is, they already elected political leadership. You already mentioned, so I have nothing to add. So political field, whatever he say, I think in most cases I will say, oh, absolutely right, I will say that. Maybe because of half 1% sorry. 99 and a half, I fully agree. So maybe little sometimes. That's okay. I also enjoy or use freedom of speech. So when we discuss, sometimes at the previous Professor Samdornbuchi also, then although my position, semi-retired position, so sometimes among ourselves is a discussion, some disagreement, a little bit here and there. But doesn't matter. That's a healthy sign. That's a healthy sign, of course, like that. So now I have nothing to say. That's all. Thank you. Now, please, now situation, as I think he already, I think he already mentioned, things are quite serious. Whether Chinese government admit or not, there is problem. So this problem, no good for Tibetan, or neither good for Tibetan or People's Republic of China as a whole. So therefore, this have to solve. The solution, use force, will never get satisfactory result. Quite often, I love former President of the United States, Mr. Bush. I really love. He's a really nice person, as a human being, very nice. His policy, Iraq, on this policy, motivation is very good. Try to bring democracy, rule of law, and change dictatorship. Very good. Motivation is very good. Goal very good, but method unrealistic. Because, use force is unrealistic. So, in spite good motivation, good goal, but method become wrong. Therefore, negative, unexpected consequences, a lot of years, few years like that. Unnecessary sort of suffering, happen. So, even powerful United States, militarily very powerful, but just rely on use force will not guarantee, will not solve the problem. So the Chinese government also very powerful militarily, but you cannot solve problem only through use force. It creates more problem. It creates more resentment. And perhaps I may add here, Tibetan people, Chinese brothers, sisters, also quite proud. It's good. You have sort of very sophisticated cultural heritage and a few thousand years civilization, history. We Tibet also, some Chinese officials consider Tibet is very, very backward. That's not true. We also, quite sophisticated sort of civilization. I want to share with you, I think around perhaps I think 79 or early 80, one occasion I was in Harvard University, some talk. Then one Chinese archaeologist, who also at that time, you see, they visiting that area. So he sent a message. He wanted to see me secretly. And then we arranged. And then he, as an archaeologist, he carried some pictures. He found certain things in Tibetan area. Perhaps I think Shamdo on this area. And he told me, after he showed these pictures, according to his finding, Tibetan civilization comes its own root. Chinese government sort of version, Tibetan civilization, come from China. He mentioned, unlike that, his finding, on the basis of his finding, is Tibetan civilization developed its own sort of root. I think it is true. And now language, Tibetan language, Tibetan script. So therefore, you see, Tibetan, quite proud, not easily, also beating, more sort of determination. It seems now, younger generation now, these days in Tibet, I think their determination is more stronger than my generation, I think. Their parents, their grandparents, 60 years passed, but Tibetan spirit never died down. So now Chinese, I think, leaders should know the reality. Best thing is our sort of the way of approach, mutually agreeable solution. That's the best way. When Chairman Mao Zedong there, he really emphasized the equality, Han people, Han brothers, sisters, and other minority brothers, sisters. He very much emphasized these things. At that time, Ulanfu, as a Mongolian, also the vice prime minister, like that. And Saftin also is a very high-ranking Xinjiang. So at that time, you see, I think that's quite good. One thing, I think Chairman Mao opposing the national difference of the narrow-minded nationalist. He opposed that. And meantime, he also opposed Han chauvinism. Now, 大汉族主义, 地方民族主义, 大汉族主义, quite balanced. Now, recent decades, the reject Han chauvinism, that now not there. So you see, I think it is very important to keep the original spirit when People's Republic of China establish. I think that is very, very important. Material development, these new education, and these things, of course, you have to sort of develop. But principle, I always telling when I visited America, I always telling my American friend, you should keep your ancestors' principle, democracy, freedom, liberty, justice. These are very, very important for economy interest. Forgetting or neglecting these principles is disaster. So similarly, people from China, in order to keep their power, not thinking about their forefathers' way. Forefathers were the founding fathers of the principle, I think, must keep. So quite attractive. When I was in Peking, 1954, 55, I very much attracted about Marxism and socialism. So actually, I asked the concerned Chinese officials, I would like to join Chinese Communist Party. Really? So still, as far as the socio-economic theory is concerned, I still consider I am Marxist. So don't surprise that not only me, some Sri Lanka Buddhist monk, and also some Indian Buddhist monk in 60s, 70s, they also describe me, they're also communist. So it is not unique. There are Buddhist Marxists there. So I'm one of them. Okay, so therefore, please, think, this holistic view, holistic sort of the factor, then please should not sort of become like, oh, today come here and enjoy Dharamsala, fresh air, and then disappear and nothing happen. No, please take action wherever you come from. It's your own area. Now already, many countries, the parliament and support group, Tibet support group, already there. So I think, firstly, Tibetan support group, and then the parliament and support group. I think you should, you should close touch with these sort of people and mobilize more voice. And also the Chinese brothers, sisters, very, very important. Finally, this problem have to solve between deep sort of mutual understanding, mutual respect between Han brothers, sisters, Tibetan brothers, sisters. So here is some Chinese brothers, sisters here. Any sister? No sister, I think only brother. Oh, they did. Oh, they're good. That okay. Chinese brothers, sisters. Otherwise, only brother. So thank you. And then many Indians. I think one occasion, sort of meeting, Indian Tibet support group, Tibetan friendship group. When I met, I mentioned our relation is some unique relations. That is relation between Guru and Chela. In this case, you are our Guru. We are your Chela. So therefore, our relation is something very, very unique. So the Indian brothers and sisters sort of support. Also, you see, very, very sort of important. Then particularly, Tibet issue also, as a matter of fact, also issue of India. India's defense, border sort of the issue like that. So it is very, very important. So thank you very much. So that's all. Thank you.